Imagine a world without cameras, no lenses, no microscopes, no zoom, no filters, no shortcuts, and yet one man in the early 1400s painted reality with such precision that people believed it bordered on magic. This was not art meant to decorate walls. This was art that challenged the human eye. People didn't just look at his paintings. They stared, they leaned closer, they whispered, because something felt wrong. The details were too sharp, the reflections too accurate, the faces too alive. At the center of this quiet shock stood one name, Jan van Eyck. But this is not a story about a talented painter. This is the story of how art turned into observation, and how reality itself became the subject. In Van Eyck's time, painters still relied on symbols. Faces were idealized, bodies were simplified, truth was suggested, not shown. But Van Eyck looked at the world differently. He asked questions no artist was asking yet. How does light bend on metal? Why does glass distort reality? Why does a face change when seen from the side? These were not artistic questions. They were scientific ones. When Van Eyck painted, he wasn't decorating surfaces. He was studying how vision works. Look closely at his paintings. You can count individual threads in fabric. You can see light reflected in polished wood. You can spot moisture in the corner of an eye. And then comes the unsettling part. The figures look back at you, not symbolically, not spiritually, but physically, as if they are aware of your presence. Some viewers believed Van Eyck possessed secret knowledge. Others accused him of unnatural realism. A few even claimed such accuracy was dangerous, because when art becomes this real, it stops being comfortable. But Van Eyck was more than an artist. He worked for powerful courts, traveled across Europe on diplomatic missions, moved through rooms where secrets mattered. He studied people, their expressions, their silence, their lies, and he painted them without mercy, not as saints, not as ideals, but as human beings. In this video, we will ask a simple but unsettling question. Was Jan van Eyck merely ahead of his time, or did he permanently change how humans see reality? From a tiny mirror hiding multiple truths, to an inscription that reads like a witness statement, to paintings so precise they erased the line between art and observation. Because one thing is certain, photography did not invent realism. Jan van Eyck already painted it. Fact 1. The oil painting revolution began with him. Before Jan van Eyck, painting was fast but limited. Most artists worked with tempera, pigment mixed with egg yolk. It dried quickly, too quickly. Once the brush touched the surface, there was almost no time to correct mistakes, to blend light smoothly, or to build true depth. Paintings looked flat, colors looked dry, light looked symbolic, not real. Van Eyck changed that forever. He did not invent oil paint, but he perfected it. By carefully refining oil mixtures, layering transparent glazes, and allowing paint to dry slowly, Van Eyck gained something no artist had before. Time to observe, time to adjust, time to let light breathe inside the painting. With oil paint, Van Eyck could do the impossible. He could layer color upon color, thin as glass, until surfaces began to glow from within. Skin no longer looked painted. It looked alive. Metal reflected light realistically. Glass distorted the world behind it. Fabric absorbed shadows instead of flattening them. For the first time in European art, light behaved like real light. This was a revolution, not a technique, because oil paint allowed Van Eyck to imitate how the human eye actually sees. Gradually, softly, with endless subtle transitions. Painters before him suggested reality. Van Eyck reconstructed it. Artists across Europe were stunned. Suddenly, tempera felt primitive. Flat colors felt dishonest. Symbolism felt insufficient. Within decades, oil painting spread across the continent, from Flanders to Italy, reshaping Renaissance art itself. Without Van Eyck's mastery of oil, there is no Leonardo realism, no Rembrandt depth, no photographic illusion in painting. Oil paint did not just slow down drying time, it slowed down art and allowed truth to appear. That is why art history marks this moment not as improvement, but as a point of no return. Fact 2. He painted details the human eye wasn't supposed to see. When people first stood in front of a painting by Jan van Eyck, many of them instinctively stepped closer. From a distance, the painting looked realistic, but up close, it became unsettling. Van Eyck painted details so small, so precise, that viewers felt as if they were seeing more than the naked eye should allow. Individual threads in fabric were visible. Tiny cracks in skin appeared. Dust rested on wooden surfaces. Minute reflections shimmered inside the eyes. These were not decorative details meant to impress. They were observational details, the result of intense study. Van Eyck was not asking how something should look, but how it truly existed in the physical world. In the 15th century, this level of precision was unheard of. Most painters simplified reality, focusing on symbols, hierarchy, and religious meaning. Van Eyck did the opposite. He treated every surface as equally important. Skin, metal, glass, wood, cloth. Nothing was background. Nothing was ignored. Some historians believe he may have used early optical aids, such as lenses or mirrors, to study light and form at extreme levels of detail, though no proof exists. And that uncertainty makes his work even more disturbing. If he used tools, he was ahead of his time. If he did not, then his eye alone rivaled technology that would not exist for centuries. This microscopic realism changed the meaning of painting itself. A portrait was no longer just a likeness or a symbol of status. It became evidence. Faces were no longer idealized. They were examined. Wrinkles, asymmetry, fatigue, imperfection, all were included. For the first time in European art, people recognized themselves not as spiritual symbols, but as physical beings made of skin, texture, and light. Van Eyck did not exaggerate reality, he dissected it. And once viewers realized that a painting could reveal things they had never consciously noticed in real life, art crossed another irreversible line. From that moment on, detail was no longer optional, it became a challenge. Fact 3. The Arnolfini mirror changed art forever. In the center of one of the most famous paintings in history, Jan van Eyck placed something no one expected, a mirror. At first glance, it looks decorative, almost insignificant. But when you look closer, the painting transforms into a visual puzzle. The convex mirror reflects the entire room from a reversed angle. You see the backs of the couple, you see the ceiling, you see the window, and most unsettling of all, you see two additional figures standing where the viewer would be. One of them is believed to be Jan van Eyck himself. This was not artistic vanity, it was a statement. Above the mirror, Van Eyck wrote the words, Johannes de Eyck fuit hic. Jan van Eyck was here. Not painted this, not created this, but was here. Like a witness signing a document. Suddenly the painting stops being just a portrait. It becomes an event. Some historians believe the Arnolfini portrait may have served as a legal record of marriage, with the artist acting as an official witness. Whether this theory is true or not, the intention is clear. Van Eyck was collapsing boundaries between artist and subject, between viewer and painting, between art and reality. The mirror does more than reflect space. Around its frame are tiny scenes from the life of Christ, painted so small they require intense focus to even notice. A single object contains multiple layers of meaning, physical reality, spiritual symbolism, and personal presence. For the first time, a painting acknowledged the existence of the viewer. You are not just observing the scene, you are inside it. Art history had never seen this before. Perspective was no longer only about depth, it was about awareness. The Arnolfini mirror quietly declared that reality could be recorded, reversed, questioned, and witnessed all at once. After Van Eyck, paintings could no longer pretend to be simple windows into another world. They had become mirrors, reflecting not only the subject, but the act of seeing itself. Fact 4. Jan van Eyck was not an artist's signature. In the Arnolfini portrait, Jan van Eyck did something no painter before him had dared to do. Instead of signing the painting in the traditional way, he wrote a sentence: Johannes de Eyck fuit hic. Translated simply, it means Jan van Eyck was here. This was not a claim of authorship, it was a declaration of presence. Medieval artists usually signed their work modestly, if they signed at all. The focus was meant to be God, the subject, or the patron, but Van Eyck shifted that balance. By writing "was here," he placed himself inside the event, not above it, not outside it. The sentence reads like something carved into a wall or written in a legal document. It feels less like art and more like testimony. This choice changes how the painting is understood. Van Eyck was not saying, "I painted this image." He was saying, "I witnessed this moment." That subtle difference is radical. It suggests the painting records a real occurrence, not an imagined scene. This is one of the reasons some historians believe the Arnolfini portrait functioned as a legal or ceremonial record, possibly related to marriage. In such a context, a witness mattered, and Van Eyck presents himself as exactly that. The artist becomes part of the reality he depicts. This was a turning point in the history of art. For the first time, the painter openly acknowledged his own role as an observer of truth. Art was no longer only about skill or symbolism. It was about presence, about being there, about seeing and recording. With a single sentence, Van Eyck elevated the artist from craftsman to conscious witness. After this moment, the idea that paintings could document reality, not just represent it, became impossible to ignore. A simple phrase quietly redefined what art could be. Fact 5. Jan van Eyck was a diplomat, not just a painter. Most people imagine Jan van Eyck confined to a studio, surrounded by brushes and panels. But Van Eyck lived a very different life. He served the powerful Duke of Burgundy, not only as a court painter, but as a trusted agent. Records show that he traveled extensively across Europe on official missions. These were not casual journeys, they were diplomatic assignments, often secretive, often sensitive. Van Eyck moved between courts, negotiated alliances, and observed people in positions of power. This matters because it explains something crucial about his art. He understood authority, he understood performance, he understood how people present one face publicly while hiding another privately. His access to elites gave him an unmatched education in human behavior. When Van Eyck painted a portrait, he wasn't guessing at character. He had spent years watching rulers speak carefully, smile strategically, and conceal intention behind calm expressions. This is why his portraits feel psychologically intense. They do not flatter, they observe, they expose. Being a diplomat also meant discretion. Van Eyck learned to notice details without drawing attention to himself. This habit carried directly into his painting style. Nothing escapes his eye, yet nothing feels exaggerated. Every gesture feels measured, every expression feels controlled. His art reflects a man trained to read rooms, not just faces. In this sense, Van Eyck's realism is not only visual, it is political. He paints people the way power truly operates, quietly, precisely, without drama. The combination of artist and diplomat was rare, and it gave Van Eyck a perspective few painters ever possessed. He was not merely depicting the world, he was navigating it. And that experience made his paintings feel less like art and more like intelligence reports rendered in oil and light. See Fact 6, the most stolen painting in history. Jan van Eyck created the Ghent altarpiece, a work so valuable that it became one of the most targeted artworks in history. Over centuries, it was stolen, hidden, dismembered, smuggled, and reclaimed again and again. Napoleon wanted it. The Nazis hunted it obsessively. During World War II, it was hidden deep inside a salt mine to prevent its destruction. One panel, The Just Judges, was stolen in 1934 and has never been recovered. Its disappearance remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in art history. The obsession surrounding the altarpiece proves something important. This was not just a religious artwork. It was considered power. Possession of Van Eyck's work meant control over cultural authority, history, and legitimacy. Few paintings in history have been treated like strategic assets. This alone shows how dangerous and influential his realism was. Fact 7. His paintings feel uncomfortably alive. There is something unsettling about Van Eyck's portraits. They do not merely resemble people, they seem aware. The eyes reflect light in a way that suggests moisture. The skin appears warm, imperfect, human. Viewers across centuries have described the same sensation, the feeling of being watched. This effect comes from Van Eyck's obsessive attention to how vision actually works. He painted faces as systems of light, texture, and reflection rather than idealized symbols. The result is psychological realism long before psychology existed as a science. His subjects feel present, not frozen. This is why his work still feels modern. It does not invite admiration, it demands confrontation. Fact 8. He treated light as a physical force. For Van Eyck, light was not symbolic or divine decoration. It was a measurable phenomenon. He studied how light bends on metal, diffuses through skin, and fractures inside glass. Shadows in his paintings are not dark paint. They are the absence of light behaving naturally. Highlights are not decoration. They are optical events. This approach changed painting forever. Light stopped being an idea and became evidence. Every later master of realism inherited this mindset. Without Van Eyck, light in art would have remained stylized. After him, it became scientific. Fact 9. He refused to idealize humanity. In an era obsessed with perfection, Van Eyck chose accuracy. His faces show asymmetry. His hands show age. His bodies show weight and gravity. This was deeply uncomfortable for a culture used to spiritual idealization, but it was honest. Van Eyck believed truth was more powerful than beauty. By refusing to polish reality, he introduced a new moral position into art, observation over flattery. His portraits do not elevate their subjects, they reveal them. This honesty reshaped how people understood identity itself. Fact 10. After Van Eyck, art could never go back. Van Eyck represents a point of no return. Once viewers saw what was possible, true light, true texture, true presence, simplification was no longer acceptable. Art could no longer pretend. It had to observe. Painters who followed him were forced to respond, either by competing with realism or deliberately rejecting it. In both cases, Van Eyck defined the battlefield. He did not just influence Renaissance art, he changed the expectations of the human eye. From that moment forward, reality itself became the standard. If this story made you see art differently, you're not alone. History hides more truths like this. Subscribe for more forgotten minds, silent revolutions, and the moments that changed how humanity sees the world.